Eiffel Tower listeners, it's another Monday in Paris. It's another episode of your favorite Paris-based podcast hosted by an Australian. It's the Eiffel Tower. And this week, well, I was inspired by the story. Did you hear about President Macron, France's president, was in my country, Australia, talking to the Prime Minister. And for some reason, he called the Prime Minister's wife delicious. Bit of a faux pas there, Macron. And with that in mind, I got thinking about the difficulties of speaking in a different language. And the guest this week on the Eiffel Tower is Geraldine from Comme Une Francaise, the popular YouTube channel. And she's talking about, the other way around, what we're doing, what people are doing wrong when they're speaking French. And also some of the kind of cross-cultural errors that people are making both ways. So that's the chat today. Listen to that in a second. But first, I can't believe that I forgot to mention it last week, but my guidebook to Paris has come out. The Eiffel Tower's 150 Things to Do in Paris. So, yeah, it's arranged by arrondissement. It's got a little bit of a tip, hidden secret restaurant, bars, everything you want to know in every arrondissement of the city. It took me ages to do. It is available for sale. All the information's on the site. And the PDF is free if you sign up as a Flaneur Patreon. So, that's something to consider doing today. But let's get on with the episode. Hang around at the end for a bit of extra news, a review, and what's coming up on Patreon and the Eiffel Tower. Here comes Geraldine.
One man, one country, one red scooter. Here's the Eiffel Tower with Oliver G.
Geraldine, welcome to the studio. How are you?
Hello, Oliver. I'm so glad to be here with you today.
And isn't it a lovely day today?
It's a wonderful day. It's so beautiful.
It's one of those days that if, for example, you were from Grenoble, you'd be thinking, I wish I lived in Paris. Am I right? No.
Well, I have to say that the weather is beautiful and seeing Paris so sunny makes you kind of think, why am I doing there? What am I doing there?
Yeah.
But actually, I love where I live.
Well, you've been there for, I think we were talking before, you said 15 years in Grenoble, born in Paris.
Yeah, I was born in Paris, but I can't believe it's already in 15 years.
Do you think it's going to be 50 years? Is that the kind of thing?
We'll see. It's a very nice place to live, especially with the mountains around. You can ski, you can go paragliding, hiking, everything you want. So it's pretty nice.
And it's not so far from the sea either, really.
You have to go south. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, but what, like half an hour or something like that?
Oh, no more.
More? I don't know. I just know it's vaguely southeast on the map somewhere.
It's southeast in geography, but you need at least 3 hours to get to the sea.
Really? Oh man! Not if you take a wrong turn when you're hang gliding from the mountains, maybe.
Yeah, and it's better to go to Switzerland or another place in France to go to a lake if you want to.
Yeah. Wow. What a multi-culti little part of the world, Grenoble. I've never been, but I plan to, and that's something I want to talk to you about. Honeymoon season at the end of this conversation, but we're here not to talk about Grenoble, as lovely as it maybe is. We're here to talk about language and culture, and who better than you, Geraldine from Comme Une Francaise, a YouTube channel, to teach me about it. So if we're on the same wavelength here, that's what you're here to do today, right?
I think so.
Yeah. To teach me and the listeners who perhaps don't speak French or perhaps learning, as I am, about these kind of common embarrassing things that people do wrong. And what we were talking about before we turned on the microphones was your president talking to my prime minister did a bit of a faux pas himself. Do you remember what happened?
Yeah, I think he told the minister that his wife was delicious. And in French it translates well, but it seems that it has a different meaning in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, delicious, you would say if you were some kind of... I mean, I don't know many men that would call any women delicious, full stop. It really suggests sort of like, I want to eat you up like a meal, you know what I mean? Or, I don't know, it's the kind of thing that people just don't really say. But it's okay to say it in French?
Yeah, because it would mean charming or lovely. And you can say that about a couple, you can say that about a person. You're kind of in a elegant, charming way, but not at all in any sexual meaning.
No, see, it just doesn't work like that, Mr. Macron. I don't know if Macron listens to this show, and if you do, get in touch. But you can't be calling people delicious.
Yeah, and it's so funny because you have good intentions and then these mistakes happen and you're very embarrassed.
Yeah.
And that's why I do lots of videos about how to compliment someone in French, because you want to be nice, but avoid this kind of embarrassing translation mistake that make you sound weird.
Yeah. It sounds like the French people like to compare women to food. What else do they say?
Lots of things, but food is so important to us that if we treat people like food, it's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Do you say, is there a compliment like, oh, you're like a fine camembert cheese? Anything like that?
That's a bit weird, I have to say.
Yeah, that is pretty weird. That's the kind of thing I'd probably try and say in French. But one of the things on the list that you've come in here with, you've come in with 5 kind of typical embarrassing, not just mistakes, but the sorts of mistakes that people can make. And the first one you've got written here is faux amis. So perhaps you could explain that from the beginning.
Absolutely. Today I'm glad that, first, thank you for inviting me. And I wanted to talk to your audience about these mistakes, because either it's good for them to learn them so they don't make them, or maybe they've been making them for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. Right. There's people I've talked to who told me, oh my God, I've been doing that for 20 years. I had no idea. And they're a bit embarrassed. But in the end, it's pretty fun. So it's better to laugh at these mistakes.
Sure.
So yes, indeed, the first one is the pretty obvious one that you learn in textbooks. It's faux amis, because French and English can be very close. And sometimes you think, okay, that word is the same, so it has to mean the same. It doesn't. And the fun example that comes all the time is preservatives, that you use in English to talk about organic food, to say, okay, this food doesn't have any. Yeah. But in French, preservatif means condom.
Condom? That sounds like a minefield. So if you go around saying, oh, I love this jam, there's no preservatives in it, and you said that to a French person,
people will say, well, I hope so. Yeah. So this often leads to hilarious stories, because people want to talk about homemade food or organic products, and they want to promote them and compliment people, and they end up with this hilarious mistake. Yeah. And this makes so many fun stories among my students.
I suppose if a French person doesn't speak English and has never heard about this faux ami before, or these faux amis before, they won't, like, for people like you and me, and maybe listeners who've learned French, they've heard that story, so they're very prepared for it. But imagine from the French person's point of view, who doesn't know that would just be so weird, right?
Yeah, because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. It would be, I can't even imagine how you'd react to that.
Me neither.
I had a guest on the show once who said that mistake happened to them.
Okay.
But besides that one instance, I find it really hard to believe that anyone's actually made that mistake, but I'm sure they do, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I've heard many from several different people.
Jeez, you got to be careful, guys. The other moral to the story is stop talking about preservatives all the time. It's not even that interesting. Get on with it.
Absolutely.
Do you know, I've got I've told it before on the show before, but I've got one mistake that I used to make regularly. You reminded me of it. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, I do.
So and apologies to you guys who've heard this one before, but I used to play basketball with all the guys down at the basketball court in Paris.
Okay.
So and they use so much slang, you know, they're always saying, mon gars, you know, like mon pote, mon grand, like it all means my buddy. So it'd be like salut my buddy, salut mon grand, everything, right? And they always call each other mec all the time, you know, like mec, which means dude. And so I just thought, and I don't know why, but I thought that I could say mon mec, which for you guys who don't know means like my babe, or sort of like
my boyfriend.
Yeah, my boyfriend. So I was going honestly, like this is true. I was honestly going up at basketball, high-fiving everyone, saying like salut mon mec, ça va mon mec, and it wasn't until I sent mon mec in an email to the guy James that used to be the producer on the show that he took me aside and said, Oliver, you can't be calling people mon mec. You can't be calling me mon mec. And I said, why not? He explained. I realized I've been doing it for a month. So I don't know where that fits on the list, but it's an example of something that happened a lot of times to me.
It absolutely does. How did you react?
I straight away my mind went back to all the people I must have said it to, because I was thinking that was my go-to thing on the basketball courts, and they all no one really said anything to me. Maybe they looked at me weird, but I guess they just thought I was a crazy foreigner trying. I don't know what they thought. Maybe they thought I was hitting on them or something. I don't know. I dread to think of it. But it doesn't. Why does it work for mon gars, mon grand, mon pote, but not mon mec?
Well, mon gars can apply to boyfriend, but it will depend on how you put it in the sentence. But if you talk about mon mec to talk about your friend, I would think you were gay.
Yeah, right.
And that's not an issue for me. But if it's not what you want to say, that might be a bit complicated.
Yeah, it was. Well, it wasn't complicated until I had to think about it all. Pretty weird, huh? But you can say mec. You can say mec all the time.
Yeah, on its own.
Salut mec.
But it's just like something we'll talk after about the translation for well done. It's the direct translation doesn't work. It's about context.
Let's talk about that one now. Let's take up that one now.
Sure.
Bad translations.
That's a very funny one because I have lots of teachers like being so shocked about that. It's a translation of well done. It sounds like you could translate it into bien fait, but that's not true because bien fait on its own means something bad happened to you and you deserved it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and
something bad happened to you and you deserved it.
I think you have an expression for that in English.
So for example, what, like you didn't pay your taxes and then you got a big bill and then someone will say bien fait.
Yeah, good on you, or you deserved it.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I'll have to think about that one.
But it's absolutely not something that means well done.
Right.
So you have to use très bien, for example, or félicitations.
Right.
And this is something that the teachers abroad, some teachers use a lot, and then they find out it doesn't mean at all that.
So they teach it incorrectly, you mean?
Yeah, or they wrote it on a student's copy on the tests.
Whoa.
And I'm like, this is not what you think it means.
No. Unless the student did a very bad test and they hadn't been studying, and then indeed it is bien fait.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
but this is rarely something that students abroad want to say.
Wow, I didn't know that one.
There were even stickers made. I've seen them online.
Bien fait.
Bien fait. And I'm like, did you really think about what you just printed?
So when would you say, tell me a literal example of when you could say bien fait?
In a positive way?
Or just in the way it's meant to be?
Oh, well, if you want to be positive, you wouldn't use it on its own. For example, you can say un travail bien fait to mean a job well done.
Right.
But bien fait on its own only means something bad happened to you and you deserved it.
And what kind of bad thing?
For example, let me think. You were trying to do something. For example, you wanted this flat in Paris, and you faked your visa,
Right.
and you didn't get the flat as soon as they discovered that your visa was fake. So bien fait pour toi, we would say that.
Ah, okay. That's good. Good. I hope you guys are all taking notes. And if you're not taking notes, theeiffeltower.com will have this top 5 for you. Bien fait. Bien fait. You can also say bien wesh. Do you know that one?
Yeah, but that's a bit different.
Bit more slangy.
Yeah, it means that means well done.
Yeah.
You did well.
Like it's bien joué, but mixed around backwards. The backwards language.
Absolutely.
That's a whole different podcast, that one.
Yeah, that's le verlan.
Le verlan. We can't even get into it, Geraldine. I'll just confuse myself. Why do they speak backwards, though? It's not cool.
It used to be the way that the butchers used to talk to each other in order to avoid other people understanding them.
Yeah.
So they made kind of a special language by putting the letters backwards.
Yeah.
But now some of them are used. And it's funny because the way you're using certain words show how old you are. So if you learned French some time ago, maybe you're using some slang that is not used anymore, or some verlan that is not used anymore. And for the word femme, I don't know if you know the story.
I don't know.
So femme becomes meuf.
So femme as in wife or woman. Yep.
So it becomes meuf and you put it backwards. And some people put it back again to say fameux.
Wow.
So it's the kind of the word backward and backward. So it doesn't make much sense, but that's how the language evolved.
I just think it's crazy to be walking around saying the word backwards anyway, let alone to be saying it backwards.
Yeah.
Would you ever say that?
This one, no, because that's not my generation.
No.
But it's very common for younger people to use different words. And I think it's very important for people who want to learn French to know that the language is not textbook French in Paris, as you probably saw. It's real spoken French.
And this is the kind of thing that you do on your YouTube channel, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In my premium classes, my paying courses, I teach that. I teach real everyday French, so you don't get shocked when you arrive in Paris and nobody speaks like you thought they were.
Yeah. Which is kind of true, really. You learn a lot of people in school in Australia anyway, they teach you like ça va, and you respond comme ci comme ça, which I've lived here for 3 years now, 3.5 years even. I've never heard someone say comme ci, comme ça. Do they ever say it? Does it exist?
It exists, as in I know it, but it's the kind of slang that is a bit old.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of thing that evolves very fast. So if you learn this in a textbook, the textbook was a bit old and it's not up to what's happening now in France.
It could have just been my teacher. He wasn't up to whatever was happening, that old guy.
And that's a cute expression, I have to say.
But have you ever said it in your whole life, really?
No, never.
I might bring it back. What do you think?
You should.
Yeah, comme ci, comme ça.
Let's give it a try.
And then you know what they always do too? They hold their hand out and sort of shake it left to right, you know? That's part of it. Comme ci, comme ça, and a shrug of the shoulders.
Absolutely. The body language in expressions in French is very important.
True. What have you got on your list? The other one we had was pronunciation, I think.
Yeah, this one is, again, something that I heard a lot. It's pronunciation mistakes that make embarrassing mistakes, especially the one with canard, that makes duck.
Yep.
And people ask for it in restaurants and they're not able to pronunciate properly and they say connard, which is an insult. It should be beeped.
Okay, so let's get the pronunciation correct now. Everybody repeat after us, after Geraldine.
Canard.
And this is duck, okay?
Yeah.
So one more time.
Canard.
Canard, okay? And the other beepy word?
Connard.
Connard. And that means, what, like bastard or something?
Yeah, it does.
I will have put a warning at the start of this to not listen if you're offended by words like bastard, so don't worry.
Yeah, that's a light insult. It's okay. And but honestly, French won't be shocked, but they'll laugh. So if you're the kind of people who is embarrassed by mistakes, just be careful. But if not, I mean, it's not a big deal. And the waiter will know what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of one of the biggest tips with learning a language is to try and overcome that feeling of being embarrassed, because you will make mistakes. Everybody. I read once somewhere that it said, if you ever hear someone speaking with a foreign accent, it's almost worth congratulating them because they're daring to speak a different person's language. I mean, look at you. Your English isn't your first language and you're sitting here on a podcast. You know, how it's brave, don't you think?
Absolutely. And you can communicate very well with few words. I always say that culture and communication are more important than the language itself. So you know how the rules of the game. So even if you have 5 words in French, which I recommend are the greetings in French, like bonjour, bonsoir, au revoir, merci, s'il vous plaît. This is much more important than learning grammar. If you're just looking for a quick weekend in Paris and you want to communicate with French people.
That's all you need. 5 words. There you go. You guys can rewind that and listen to that on repeat. In fact, you can hold it up and play it to the waiter. That's how you can get your duck. The other pronunciation one you've got is coup and cool, and I never say those words for fear of getting them wrong. I don't know.
See, these are very, very classic.
Neck and backside, all those words. I just try and find a way to talk about something else.
Yeah, you can.
Any tips?
You can indeed talk about other things,
but
cul and coup are different ways to put your mouth. So if you want to improve your pronunciation, you should work on those so you can really feel it in your mouth.
So if you can teach me, we can all learn.
Coup.
And what's that?
Coup is the neck.
Coup.
Yeah, coup. Very good.
Okay. And it's almost like a bird.
And cul.
Cul.
Yeah, it's bottom.
Bottom, okay.
So don't mix them.
No, but it's hard to even remember which one's which. Coup is like a neck, so we can remember it's like a bird putting its neck out. Coup.
Yeah.
And then cul is a bit flatter, like a bottom, sitting down. Coup, coup, coup. Yeah, okay, got it. And there's another one. Isn't there something else like
Yeah, I had a student who came to me and told me, I was talking to a French man in the countryside and he was working on his house and the wall around his house. So he asked him, so are you doing le mur? And she said l'amour. So faire l'amour in French is to have a relationship, as in, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And faire
an explicit relationship.
Faire le mur means to make your wall, to build it.
So what? Oh my God!
And
that's
he
a good
was
one.
very confused because he thought she was hitting on him.
Yeah. So So making love or making a wall, that's a really good one. I've not thought about that one more.
Yeah.
Faire le mur. Just put a big space in front of it. That's the best way. Faire le mur and faire l'amour.
Yes.
Right, wow. It's a minefield. It's
a good source for funny mistakes,
Yeah.
indeed.
I did an episode once about mistakes that people had made, and a guy wrote in with a story that he's an Australian guy and he had intimate relations with a French woman, right? And it was sort of bedtime and they were sort of falling asleep, and she leaned over to him and she said that she loved him, you know? She said, "Je t'aime." And he thinks about it. He's like, whoa, that was quick. I only met her tonight. We're not going to judge him, but they'd only met that day. Anyway, so he's thinking she loves me already. And he thinks about it, and then he responds, "Je t'aime aussi," like I love you too. And she sort of sat up straight. She said, "What did you say?" He said, "Je t'aime aussi." She goes, No. I said, "Je t'aime." As in...
Should I turn off the light?
Yeah. That's a true story, apparently. Je t'aime. Je t'aime. I get it. They're quite similar.
I can see where this mistake comes from, indeed. But that's pretty fun.
The moral of the story, don't sleep with someone on the first date.
Oh, no. Don't say that.
I'm just trying to find a moral. There's always a moral. What's the moral of the story then?
It's if someone tells you they love you after one night, maybe you didn't understand properly.
That's a better moral.
But for French people in relationship, we don't have any rules, so it's really up to you.
What does that mean? You don't have any rules?
We're not judging. If you want to engage in anything, it's really up to you.
That sounds nice. There you go. Fourth on the list, cultural faux pas. What's that?
It's a funny one. It's more about culture rather than the embarrassing mistakes you can make with language. For example, the most obvious one I can think is, for example, never, ever, ever hug a French person. They're not going to be offended, but they might freeze or have a heart attack. And it's very funny because you can see how cultural it is, because for lots of people, la bise that I would do very easily as I'm a French person.
La bise is kissing on the cheeks.
Sounds like very intimate to some foreigners. And for me, the hug itself can be too intimate because the whole body touches.
Yeah.
So it's so funny because it's not that someone is right and someone is wrong. It's just a difference in culture. And if you want to be nice to someone you're just meeting, or even after a couple of years, don't hug them.
Don't hug. Never hug them.
Don't.
Do you know what's weird? In Sweden, where I used to live, they hug all the time. That's how they... In Sweden, they hug. And in France, they do the bees kisses. So if you want to ever see an awkward meeting, watch a Swedish person meeting a French person. Because the Swedes don't like kissing and the French don't like hugging. They sort of like two same ends of a magnet coming next to each other. They start revolving around each other, getting all nervous. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I've seen that with French people and Americans a lot, never knowing whether to shake hands or do la bise or hug. And it ends up in an awkward, funny bear hug bise thing. Yeah. And again, if this happens to you, don't be embarrassed because it happens to us as well. Yeah. Sometimes you don't know if you have to do la bise or shake hands. So it's awkward, but it happens to everybody.
Not to mention in Grenoble, they faire la bise, but they start on the other side.
I've heard that, but honestly, I'm so into it that I don't even know.
You don't think about it.
But yeah, it depends on the region of France. You start left or right, and you can do 1, 2, 3, 4. It depends on where you live.
I feel like it's a myth that there's 4 kisses. Is that true? I've never seen it.
Yeah, I have.
Do you know where?
Again, I can't remember, but it happened.
I think it's a myth. I think you once saw like you had a glitch in the Matrix moment where like you looked at something through a mirror, or there was a refraction of something and you saw it twice. I want to find this village where they kiss 4 times.
If you go on your honeymoon around France, you will see it.
Yeah.
I promise.
Do you think that I should, and Geraldine's referring to the season 4 honeymoon season, scooter ride in a heart shape around France. More on that later. But if I do it when I go into these small villages, should I be kissing people anyway?
Not yet.
No, okay.
But you can see it in the street.
Okay, so I'll have to watch everybody. But if I find that the village or the villages where they do 4 kisses, I'm definitely going to make a video there. Don't you think that would be great?
Absolutely.
Find the mayor of the village and get him to explain it to me?
You should.
Oh, I'm excited just thinking about it. So that's a cultural faux pas. Don't hug French people, guys. Even if you're in Sweden, just realize that they'll be freaking out. And you don't want to give anyone a heart attack, do you?
Hope not.
Okay, fifth on the list, subtle mistakes that'll make you embarrassed later.
This is for our audience listening who is more at an advanced level and who want to integrate in France or make friends with make French friends abroad, is learning at some point the subtle mistakes that won't make you stand out in a crowd of French people. For example, mastering tu and vous is important. Avoiding swearing or learning how to use slang as well. Not speaking textbook French. This is not big, but if you don't master that, you will really stand out. And honestly, if you're looking for a job, for example, in France, if you don't master those, it can cost you a job interview.
Right. So what's the secret then?
You have to learn about it. So, for example, on Comme Une Francaise, I talk about that a lot, and I've heard lots of people telling me I've been in France for years. And with Comme Une Francaise, I really sat down and watched the videos. Maybe some of them took my courses, and they really saw a new level of French spirit into them and integrating better. Some of them, I know a student of mine, she lives in Nice in the south of France, and she's been to the same restaurant for month, and she takes one of my classes, I remember, and she comes back to me and she says, okay, I've been there for a month, and this is the first time after using the phrases you taught me that the owner did la bise to me.
Oh, really?
So I felt like I belonged, and this is a huge improvement for me, so thank you so much. So it's little things, but as soon as you really start to see the culture that you've never seen before, because no one ever taught you or showed you any of that, you can really open a new door into your learning.
There you go, guys. You heard it from the source. Comme une Francaise, COMMEUNEFRANCAISE. .com?
Yeah.
And then on YouTube as well. You guys have got it. The links will all be on the Eiffel Tower. But I wanted to ask you one question about that. Where did you come up with Comme une Francaise? Where did that come from?
It's funny because my mom is Mexican, so I've always been binational. I can speak both languages. So I've always seen what it was to be a foreigner because my mom is a foreigner.
Yeah.
So I could see a bit of racism, a bit of people not seeing her as she belonged, and etc. And then I moved to Britain for 2 years to work as an engineer because I'm a renewable energy engineer.
Yeah.
And I was a foreigner.
Yeah.
So I saw what it was not to fit in terms of culture. I could speak English, but the language and the culture are very, very different. And then I came back, I started teaching French to refugees at the Red Cross in Grenoble, and they had questions that I could answer, which were the questions I had myself when I was in Britain. So I thought, that's really good, and I really like teaching culture and language. And that's how Comme Une Francaise started. I asked a couple of American friends, what do you think if I was teaching culture, everyday things, and language? And they were telling me, oh, please do this. I need it now. And the French woman has such an aura abroad that I thought it was a fun thing. Yeah. But now we have over 30% of men in our students.
Oh, really?
So they saw that it was just a name, and they're absolutely welcome, and they're fantastic students.
Well, there you go. Men and women, you are also welcome to be Comme une Francaise or Comme un Français, although you can't search for it like that. Join Geraldine. She'll teach you French. She'll teach you culture. And I want to talk to you, if you'll hang around for a little Patreon chat as well, a little bit more about your background, because that's quite interesting. And the bonus point on your list here, which we don't have time for in this one, but are you willing to hang around for a little bit?
Absolutely, yes.
Great. Well, thank you for coming into the studio and teaching me.
Thank you, Oliver.
And thanks for teaching all these listeners out in Radio Land as well. And
I wish all the audience of the Eiffel Tower a fantastic day.
Oh, you're very kind. I wish you guys the same thing. So thanks for coming in.
Merci. À bientôt.
You're listening to the Eiffel Tower podcast.
So there you have it. That was Geraldine. She hung around for a bonus Patreon episode where we talked, it was a bit risque. We talked about some of the rude mistakes that you might be making when you're speaking French. All of the mistakes, basically, I was making already, as usual. So I wanted to read out a review before we get on to a little bit of what's coming up news, because this was a fun one. It took me by surprise, too. It is, believe it or not, a 5-star review from Kim R. in Colorado. And she says, Oliver is great! Capital letters. Not only does he create a funny, informative podcast, he is an expert international logistician. Now, I read this and I was thinking, what the hell is this going to be about? She continues, I bought a tote bag and had my old address from 2 years ago listed on my PayPal. Oliver contacted me when my tote returned to France, and once I gave him the correct address, my well-traveled tote made it all the way back to Colorado. Thanks so much. I toted the tote to the gym today, and I think I may have worked out just a tad harder because of it. Whoa! So there you go. If you get the Eiffel Tower tote bag, the lunch pack in Notre Dame, you will work out harder. And I didn't plan to do this, but because your review put me in a good mood, anyone who signs up on the flaneur level of the Patreon, which is what I'm really focusing on at the moment to make this into my full-time gig, anyone who signs up and sends me the code word TOTE, T-O-T-E, gets a free tote bag. I'm not writing this anywhere. This is just for you guys out there as a thank you for supporting this show. T-O-T-E. I will ship it out to you. Maybe even twice. Who knows? Depends if your address is right. Speaking of Patreon news, if you guys have never heard of it or you don't know what I'm talking about, this is a way that you guys subscribe to the show to support it, and in return you get a lot of bonus stuff. So, for example, Geraldine, today's guest, has actually done 2 walk shows with me. The first was on Rue Crémieux, the most colourful street in Paris, and then we went along the elevated walkway. And the other one we did was in Bout-Chaumont, a really beautiful park up in the northeast. Yeah, and she also did the bonus episode. So if you signed up today, you'd get 3 extra things from her. What's coming up? We've got a walk show on Rue de Martyrs. We've got, here's a fun one. I bumped into Frank, the guy that does Cake Boy Paris. He's like lots of pastries and exciting cakes and that kind of stuff. I bumped into him on the street and we had a chat, and he agreed to walk me down what he calls the best street for bakeries in Paris. So we're going to do a live walk show on Facebook, later up on a sort of a hidden YouTube page. So yeah, $10 a month subscription. If that sounds like a lot to you, please just leave an iTunes review. That's also really helpful, or tell your friends about the show. And if that's something you can afford, then honestly consider signing up, and I'm sure you'll have a good time behind the scenes watching all this extra stuff. Maybe see you on the other side, and thanks for listening this week.